Facebook friends, Catch here. Happy Friday night. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in, by the way. I really appreciate you watching. So I wanted to just, I was thinking of what to share with you today. I was going to do a live on the golf course, but then we too busy focusing on playing. And then I come across, when we got home, this is literally one of my favorite books of all times. You can't actually, because it's back to front. It's called The Next Millionaires. So written by, hey Camilla, written by a guy named Paul Zane Pilzer, actually written in 2007 or 2006. So Paul didn't write the book himself. He actually had someone go around to listen to the speeches that he was sharing at conferences and educating people about how to take advantage of technology and wealth creation. He's an economic advisor to 2 US presidents. He's world-renowned. He's written books. One of his books is God Wants You to Be Rich. Unlimited Wealth is another book. And this next, he talked about The Next Trillion is another book talking about the health and wellness revolution versus the sickness business that we're currently, our system's designed around. And this book, The Next Millionaires, someone followed him around to all these training that he was doing. And literally he, thanks Camilla, he recorded it, put it into some sort of structure and went up to Paul and said, hey, I've written a book from your speeches. What do you reckon? You publish it. And Paul read it and thought, go for it. And this is the book. It's called The Next Millionaires. The guy's a phenomenal speaker and educator. And he's really, there's some real key principles in this book where literally 2007 he predicted apps. He predicted the ability to communicate, on the internet through a device with other businesses and other people real time that will add value to our lives and make our lives easier in a lot of ways. So that was the book. I read it back in 2007, just blew my mind about what this guy was sharing about. I've read it several times since. He talks about in the book, I'm going to read you some of the stuff. He talks about free trade being an antidote for war, because when countries have free trade, it's the engine that grows wealth and, that grows the country's wealth. So you look at, stuff going on around the world, it's like when free enterprise and free trade is in place, it actually has people think bigger than just right and wrong and bombing each other. So that was one of the things he talks about in the book. I think that's in more God Wants You to Be Rich as well. But he talks about these laws of alchemy and the law around technology and how technology is the key defining, factor in wealth creation. And so he's got these laws. So I'm just going to read some out to you and maybe you can just think of how this applies to you. But the first law of economic alchemy says there is no resources to run out of because all resources are inventions of the human mind. So we actually don't have limited resources. That's a myth because we made the resources up. We actually determined that that's a resource that we want to use. So there's no such thing as a limited resource because it's an oxymoron. It's like the resources are inventions of the human mind. Second thing is that economic alchemy is that the supply of any given resource at any given moment depends on the technology upon which you find it. So it gives an example in the book of how, back in they were drilling for oil. They said that there's a certain amount of oil at a site. So that's the wealth of the site. And then they found technology to drill deeper and be able to find more of that so-called resource. And then you look at fuel injectors. I'm not a car expert, so don't quote me on it. But back in the 70s when they used to get X amount of miles per gallon, then all of a sudden they brought in this new technology which allowed the resource to get twice as much value out of it. So all of a sudden now you're getting 3 or 4 times the amount of value out of that resource. It's the technology that determines the resource. And then he goes into that your personal wealth is equal to P times T. Now I've done a training system on that training video on this before, but just I'll come back to it because it's P times T equals your wealth. So the third law around this wealth model is that the advance in technology is determined by the speed in which we exchange information. So the technology is determined by the speed of the exchange of information. So imagine two parties being able to share information, and all technology we look at is that something that improves the quality of your life. So a car, for example, is a technology. Back in Henry Ford days, everyone thought he was crazy. That's a technology that then improves our lives. So technology is really something like, he gives an example in the book how you're on an island, let's say there's 10 of us, we're all, we each go fishing each day to catch our fish, and then someone invents a net. All of a sudden, now we've got 80% unemployment because 2 people can operate the net, and we're catching 10 times as more fish. So that then frees other people up to then go and do other things like collect firewood or spices or, build a safe house, and people have these different jobs. And then he talks about, that there's one person that educates other people about what the technologies that other people are bringing to the table. And then you run into another island, and the person who's the most valuable to that community is the person that can educate people about the other technologies, not so much the person doing the work. So that's kind of intellectual distribution, he calls it. So it's really evolved where, a lot of you guys know that I'm passionate about network marketing, that, where we don't physically distribute products, we intellectually educate people and add value to people's lives and share in the profits. So he talks about this fourth law that technology merely doesn't help fill a need. Technology actually determines what constitutes a need. So he talks about back in when Henry Ford invented the motor vehicle, that everyone thought it would just be a luxury. And then as it evolved, then it became more and more need. We needed roads, we needed gas stations, we needed all these things to service that technology. So technology not only determines what is a resource, it determines how much of that resource is available and how we use it. And then technology determines what sort of resources we need. So that's the third law. So did technology actually determine what constitutes a need? So the fourth law that's the fourth law. The third law was the exchange of information. That determines the book, Bradley, is called The Next Millionaires. So it's The Next Millionaires, that's the cover. You'll have to flip it around. It's called The Next Millionaires. A vast amount of new wealth is being created over the next 10 years, which has been and gone now. Here's why and how you can be a part of it. He really, the game is that he's really trying to break down economics from a big picture, country, nation, people, civilization point of view, and breaking it down into what can you do? What can you do to shift your mindset around how you see the world and how you can take advantage of these technologies that are shifting the wealth. See, it's actually easier to be in business now and be an entrepreneur, right? And be able to add value to people's lives and sharing the profits. It's easier for us now than big business because they have all the infrastructure, all the systems, they're slow moving. They're like the Titanic and we're like a jet ski. We can change direction at any time. So that whereas they've got to go through all their channels and and it's such a fast moving pace because of the exchange of information. So he talks about the fifth law is simply that there is no limit to demand. Demand is always going up. If you look at all you said 10 years ago about smartphones or devices, that they're predicting by 2022 or whatever that we're going to have 10 devices each. Like there's more and more demand because technology opens up more and more access to things that can improve our life. Now, whether they improve our life or not, that's debatable. But the sixth law is where he really talks about how you can take advantage of it, which is the technology gap, which is where there's a gap in the marketplace that you can place yourself to then participate in this wealth creation shift that's going on. And one of the things that he talks about in this book is really a formula that your wealth is equal to your P times your T. So your personal resources times the technology. So I might do a video on it later on, but really this book is, it really talks about how there's a gap in technology and us being educated about things that add value to our life and that improve the quality of our life. And manufacturers are really struggling with how to educate people because we're so bombarded with information, because we're so overwhelmed with all the choices and all the marketing messages, and we have really switched off. I mean, it used to be you have to be educated, 5 or 6, 7 touch points to want to buy something. Now it's like up to 12 or 15 because we're just so bombarded with marketing and advertising messages, and there's so much manipulation to try and get us to buy shit we don't need, right? That we can't really decipher what's going to be a real value to our life and what's really just a waste of money. And we're collecting things. So what he talks about in this book is this intellectual distribution of this technology gap that manufacturers are partnering with consumers to educate and empower them to make informed decisions that improve the quality of their life. And that's really one of the technology gaps in the health and wellness industry, because there's been so many breakthroughs, but we're also so skeptical that, same again, there's a technology gap because our systems are all based on sickness, not wellness. And so this is really just, I will do the W equals P times T a bit later on, but it's pretty much your wealth is determined by your physical, it used to be physical resources, but now it's more about the people you know, the experiences you have, and the time available, so your own P, and then times the T is your skills, your general skills, your technology skills, so what are you specifically good at, and then also your ability to learn and adapt new skills. And then the second part of the T is how we're using technology to impact more people to then benefit from that and profit from that. Hey, Jimmy. So really, just a recap on the book's called The Next Millionaires. Freaking phenomenal book, right? Talks about technology. That technology not only determines a resource, it determines the quality of the resource, the quantity of the resource, how we use the resource. It actually defines a resource because the technology is, it's an invention. There's no such thing as resources. There's unlimited resources. Because look, frankly, if we ran out of oil tomorrow, right, we'd have to use up here to find better ways of doing things, right? Sometimes we're stuck in these old technologies because the system likes it that way, right, for one. But also, too, that we haven't been forced. Every time there's been something go on that forces us to come up with something bigger and better, we often improve it. So it's like there's no such thing as a resource. We invent resources. The technology determines a resource. Technology determines how much access we have to that resource, how we use that resource, what determines a need inside of resource. Technologies determine what we need. And then also, too, that we have our own technology gaps. We have our own gaps where knowing about what's available to us that can improve the quality of our life, whether it be products and services, whether it be business opportunities, whether it be different ways of thinking, that's where the technology gap is personally. And I just love the book because it really gave me an insight into building my network of people that know, like, and trust me, adding value to that network, and finding better ways of doing things and really absorbing. It just made me more hungry to learn about what's out there that I can share with people, that I can benefit from myself, that I can help other people benefit from. And it's why I've got a massive network of friends and people in business that know, like, and trust me, and that I can influence to help them have a better life, to help me have a better life. And that's really what I've taken from the book. It's really great, by the way, if you were in a job, when I first read that, I made sure if I'm ever, before obviously now I'm unemployable, but when I was looking at jobs, I was looking at, is this going to increase my wealth creation model, my W equals P times T? So is it going to give me a bigger, better network? Is it going to give me some real skills that I can use later on outside of this job? And is it going to help me adapt and learn? That adaptability quotient, he calls it in the book, is the most important skill you can have. The skill to learn and adapt to new skills. That's the most important skill you can have. It's called AQ. It's more important than EQ and IQ, because if you don't adapt, you're going to die in these, especially in business. So anyway, The Next Millionaires, phenomenal book. I'll do another live on it next week after I've reread it and even look at how we can some actions you could take, or maybe just more, be a bit more sourceful about some of the distinctions in there, because it's been a couple of years since I've read it. But absolutely love it. the Next Millionaires, get all over it, and look at how you can take advantage of this shift in wealth back to everyday people rather than these big corporations. So lots of love, guys. Hope that's been of value for you on your Friday night. Drop me a comment of maybe what resonates with you about what you think you could take away from that. And lots of love. I'm going to enjoy my Canadian club and go the Cowboys. All right, thanks. See ya.